Hello and welcome to the Snickerdoodle Knits YouTube channel. I am Jessica, the knitter and designer behind Snickerdoodle Knits. In this video tutorial, I will demonstrate how to join in the round or how to work in the round using double pointed needles. I will assume in this tutorial that you are familiar with working flat, so you are familiar with working in cast on and working knit stitches. If that is not the case, I will link those tutorials in the description down below. Now to get started, you'll need your double pointed needles and your yarn. Depending on your preference, you can work using double pointed needles using either 4 double pointed needles or 5 double pointed needles. So you can choose if you want to split your stitches into a triangle shape. So you would use 3 needles for that, plus 1 needle as like your working needle to work the stitches off of those needles. Or you can choose to work your stitches in a square shape, which would require 4 needles plus your additional needle for working your stitches. Now to get started, when you're casting on your stitches, you can decide if you want to cast them all onto one needle and then distribute those stitches between the needles, or if you want to distribute those as you are casting on. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to just use a basic cast on. So we'll start with a slip knot. And put that on what we are going to use as our first needle. Now I'm going to cast on a total of 40 stitches, and I will distribute those between my needles after I cast on. So let's go ahead and cast on 40 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Now, to distribute your stitches, let's say I'm going to distribute them between 4 needles. So I'll want 10 stitches on each needle. So I'll go ahead and transfer 10 stitches to the second needle. Alright, so now I've transferred 10 stitches onto that needle. So now I'll pick up the next needle and transfer 10 stitches onto that needle. And then, now that I have 10 stitches on that needle, I'll transfer 10 stitches to my 4th needle. Alright, there we go. I now have 10 stitches on each of 4 needles. To join in the round, I find it easier for starters just to kind of center my stitches when I'm not using the particular needle. And then when you're distributing your stitches, or when you're getting ready to start working in the round, you want to make sure that all your stitches are facing the same direction. So I want to make sure here all of my stitches are facing down and that there's no twist between my needles. Because if we have a twist in our stitches, that will twist our entire project and may cause the entire project to be a disaster, which is not what we want. So to start, this is going to be my first needle and this will be my last needle. The reason I know that is because my tail from my cast on is on this needle and my working yarn is connected to this last needle. So, to get started, I'll take, now again, make sure that you keep your stitches all facing the same direction, and then bring your yarn through. Alright, So you can choose if you want to kind of hold on to all the needles while you're working, or if you just want to hold on to your first and last needle as you join in the round. But we'll pick up our additional needle that will be used for working the stitches, and we will put that here into our first stitch on our first needle. So again, this is where our tail from our cast on is. Put that in. And bring your last needle up close to that first stitch, just as if you were like working flat with 2 needles. You want that stitch real close so that you can work that stitch. You just work it as a knit stitch or whatever your pattern indicates. But once you work that first stitch onto your working needle, you want to make sure you pull the yarn snug so that you don't have a gap in your yarn here. It's very common to get ladders between your needles. And then we will just continue to work off of that first needle until we have worked all of those stitches. Alright, so now I have worked all 10 stitches off of my first needle. So my first needle is empty, and my working needle now has my first 10 stitches on it. So this empty needle will now become our working needle as we work through the second needle of stitches. And again, when you start this needle, just make sure that this yarn here is not twisted and that your stitches are not twisted. So we'll just go ahead and work this first stitch as a knit stitch, or whatever your pattern indicates. And just basically work it. This is technically your second needle here, because we worked our first needle of stitches, but it's essentially like the left-hand needle of when we're working flat. So just work that like you normally would work a stitch, and paying special attention to pull that yarn snug so we don't have a gap in our yarn here. And then we'll just continue to work those stitches on the second needle. And we'll continue to do this the whole way around our needles. And it's the same method whether you're using like a square, the 4 needles plus the 1 working needle, or if you're working a triangle, 3 needles plus your 1 working needle. So that's the last stitch. This is just kind of a twist and a wrap around the needle from the yarn. And we will start that again. So bring your yarn up to work it. Make sure your stitches are not twisted. Make sure this yarn here is not twisted. Grab your working needle and continue to work that as we've worked the others. Alright, now we worked the stitches off of our third needle. We just have 1 more needle left, and we always know where the beginning of our round is because of where this tail is. So if you ever lose track, you can always just remember that your tail indicates the beginning of the round, so you know that you have 1 needle left until we get to that beginning of the round. So again, we just pick up our working needle and continue to work these stitches, pulling snug on that first stitch of the needle. Alright, now we have worked 1 round of all of our stitches. As you can see here, 1 round worked of all of our stitches. So now to continue, you would just start your second round and you would continue to work exactly the same way. Picking up your working needle and continuing to work. And I always find that first round of knitting is always the most awkward, most difficult, and as you continue to work your fabric and it gets longer, it kind of holds the needles together a bit easier and it goes a lot more smoothly. So there we go. We've now worked 1.5 rounds around using double pointed needles. And again, the methodology is exactly the same if you're using a total of 4 needles or like a triangle shape here instead. I'll go ahead and cast that on and just show you what it looks like with the stitches here. So here I have cast on 30 stitches and distributed them between 3 needles to create like the triangle shape that I was talking about. And just wanted to show you me working, like show you what it looks like when I'm working through with just the 3 needles instead of the 4 needles, because I personally find that it's a little bit easier to manage just having 1 less needle in there. But of course it's completely personal preference. As is with pretty much anything in knitting, there's a lot of flexibility to adjust to what feels most comfortable and most natural for you, and make sure whatever you're doing doesn't cause you any harm. It's common to get maybe some pain in your elbows or your wrists if you're not working in a way that is ergonomical for your body, good on your body. So it's just a demonstration of how to work with 4 needles instead of 5 needles, 3 needles that have stitches on them plus the 1 needle that is the working needle. Once I finish this needle here, I will go ahead and show you what it looks like. So if I even out my stitches into the center, there you go. It's just a triangle of stitches there. So like I demonstrated in my circular needle tutorial, to store these, of course you could go ahead and just kind of store them in your project bag like this, but there are things called needle minders. These don't fit my needles, but the idea is that it's just like a case for your double pointed needles. So what you would do is you just set your needles and your work into the needle case, the needle minder, and of course once your work is longer, your work can kind of just stick out between the 2 snaps. But you would stick your needles in there. I can show again with the circular needle the idea, the concept. So if you just pretended there was no cord here, it'd be like double pointed needles that actually fit. Just stick those into the needle minder, the needle pouch, and snap those, and then that will keep your work secure so it doesn't fall off the needles. If you're worried about your needles coming out, of stitches falling off, anything like that, very real possibilities. Something like a needle minder will just hold those needles together, and then your work can just come out between the snaps here, so that you don't have to worry about drop stitches and having to fix messes that happen in your project bag when you're not working on your project. So there you go. You now know how to work in the round, join in the round, and then work in the round using double pointed needles. The main thing to remember is that when you join in the round, make sure that you do not twist your stitches, or you will end up with a twist in your entire project. And if you're making something like hats or mittens, this will make your project completely unusable. If you're working something like a scarf, in the round, it will create just like a twist in your scarf. Like if you have, say, an infinity scarf that has a twist in it. That's what will happen if you have a twist in your stitches as you're working in the round. I hope you found this video helpful, informative, and easy to follow. If you continue to have questions, go ahead and replay this video at a slower speed and leave whatever questions you have in the comments below, and I'll get back to those as soon as I can. If you're interested in learning more about working in the round with circular needles and what magic loop is and how you can use it, go ahead and visit that link in my description box down below. If you liked this video tutorial, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Snickerdoodle Knits YouTube channel for additional knitting content tutorials like this one. I hope to see you around. Happy knitting!